Today, we have Professor Frank Rövekamp with us, who is a professor of Japanese studies, and he's also the director of East Asian Studies. He's director of the East Asia Institute of the Ludwigshafen University of Business and Society. And Frank is also an accomplished shogi player of the third Dan, if I understand correctly, yeah, and former winner of the German Shogi Championship in 2021. Yes. And also the chairman of the Federation of European Shogi Associations. So what we have here is really both a scholar and a practitioner. And Frank's work that he will be sharing with us today is focusing on the history of shogi in the Edo period.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Hello, also everybody online. It's a great honor to be here, and well, time is limited. I talk about shogi in the Edo period, so I will start without further ado. And let me show you first what I want to talk about. First, because I assume not everybody here is very familiar with shogi, I will give a very brief outline of what we are talking about. Then I will talk a bit about the Edo period itself, why this is such a significant period in Japanese history. I think this is important to know. But then I will go into the issue of organization of shogi in the Edo period. You will learn that it was already highly organized at that time. And then we come to our core topic of today, the so-called Ohashi records, because this is a bunch of material with very interesting substance, diary notes, and things like this, which enhance really very much our understanding of shogi in those times. I present some of those findings, just select a few items. And at the end, I try to put it into perspective. So what is the significance of these records? And what do we still need to do, which is a lot, if I may say so. So what you see here, this is shogi. And basically, I assume most of you know about chess. And we have very similar things. We have two kings here and there, and these kings need to be checkmated. And on the right, you see a board, an actual board used for playing. And so a few words about it. No? Well, like Western chess, shogi derived actually from the Indian game of chaturanga. No? So you may say shogi is a cousin of Western chess. No? And then proto-shogi or proto-chess reached the shores of Japan probably in the 10th century. And that we know because the oldest shogi pieces, they were excavated from a temple in Nara called Kofukuji, and these pieces date from the year 1058. Shogi then developed over the centuries, and like chess, like Western chess as well, people were playing with different rules and variants, and it assumed their current rules in the 16th century, probably. And especially the rule which makes shogi very fascinating, that you can reuse captured pieces. This most probably came about in the 16th century. And then in the Edo period, officially 1603 to 1867, which was a very important period and which we are going to talk about, During those times, shogi became a government-sponsored craft or art. And because of that, some people were lucky enough to play and teach and do shogi all the time. And obviously, with such kind of setting, shogi techniques made great advances during the Edo period. Well, later on, when we entered modern times, when the old system broke down, there was a period of uncertainty for shogi players, but then lucky enough, in the 1890s, the major Japanese newspaper decided, okay, we become sponsors of shogi. So we print the game records, and we found a professional system. And in a way, this setup is continuing until today. So today we have about 200 professional players competing for various titles with quite some nice prize money. And about 100,000 amateur players, maybe a little bit less, take shogi as a more or less serious pastime. A few pictures here. These are, in fact, the oldest pieces from 1058. They are on display in the Archaeological Institute of Kashihara. I visited there in February, and quite nice to see them, and you can clearly recognize these as shogi pieces. When you see shogi on the left side is two top professionals play. The left guy, Mr. Fuji Sota, is now the top guy in Japan. When they play the high-ranked title matches, it's quite stylish, as you can see, in traditional robes. Here playing in the temple. They get 8 hours of thinking time each, and of course they sleep in between, but this is quite something. And amateur shogi looks like a chess tournament or a Go tournament for amateurs all over the world. The right picture is about our European Championship, which we held each year. And the atmosphere is like that. Good. A few words about the Edo period. Why is it an important period? Well, it officially commenced in 1603. And before that, there was civil war, more than a century. So Japan, there were warlords and they were fighting with each other, and a very complicated area. But then there was this one guy, this one gentleman called Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was a very important warlord also at the time. And he managed in 1600 to win the decisive battle, and then he could gain control of total Japan. And that's why in 1603 he was made the shogun, so the top military leader, and then he was in that position. He moved actually the capital from Kyoto to Edo, which is today's Tokyo. And his great achievement was not just to gain control once, but he was able to really institutionalize his rule for his family for the whole period, for 250 years. Which of course is an extraordinary feat in history, if you compare that even with other countries. And so we had 15 successive Tokugawa shogun ruling the country until 1867, when the system broke down. And during this period, this is also important, Japan was closed. Tokugawas closed the country. The reason was they didn't want to get colonized. Because the colonial powers were already in Asia all around. They were in China, and one of the reasons why they said no, is that they feared interference from missionaries and various things. So they closed the country. So Japan kind of was isolated at that time for 250 years. However, we can say during this period, peace prevailed, which is also extraordinary. Think of Europe between 1600 and 1850. It's extraordinary to have such kind of peace period. And of course, we had peasant uprising. We had different difficult phases given. But there are more or less peace prevailed, and we had advances. Economic advances and also major cultural advances. Theater, the kabuki, literature, various arts, woodblock printing, the so-called ukiyo-e, especially since the 18th century. This was really thriving. And in the big cities, in Edo especially, but also in Osaka, Kyoto area, culture made really lots of advances. I show you two pictures. Left is Tokugawa Ieyasu, the great shogun, one of the greatest figures of Japanese history at all. And I show you the 10th shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, about 150 years later. He was not a great ruler. In fact, he almost didn't rule, but I show him here because he played shogi all the time. And yeah, I talked about the ukiyo-e woodblock prints, and I can show you here also shogi was featuring during those times in such woodblock prints. The left one I like a lot. It's from the 18th century, in fact, and it's I think quite a real picture. Children playing in the living room, fighting over it. Hey, show me the pieces or something like this. It's almost real life, and it's quite fascinating. And the right one is dates from the 19th century. Edo period had a lot of literature, all genres and everything, and also travel literature. And also here you find in such kind of literatures shogi themes. So this is a book about traveling on the Tokaido, the famous street between Osaka and Tokyo. And on the right hand, you can see there's a guest house, people coming here and people sitting here playing shogi. Well, how was shogi then actually organized? Okay, it's one thing that people like playing it, but as I said, it was made a government-sponsored art. How was it organized then? Well, in general, such kind of government-sponsored arts and crafts, but also businesses, in fact, trading houses and things like this, they were institutionalized in the so-called houses. In Japanese, it's called ie. And well, what is meant by a house? A house is not only a direct family. A house consists of the direct and also wider family, but also apprentices, also all kinds of servants and service people. Well, depending on what this house did, it could be quite big, that dozens or maybe hundreds of people would live there or would be close together. But yeah, let's keep in mind, we have a family, we have a headmaster, but also wider family, some apprentices, servants. And the leader of the house is the headmaster, called the Iemoto, and he has more or less absolute authority. Everybody follows his directions. And the important thing about this, these houses were, legal institutions. it does not come up, let me say, coincidentally. So people live together, we do that. No, these were kind of legal institutions. So a house was owning property. Yeah. And the headmaster was officially listed. And his role as the boss was really acknowledged. And they had communication channels to officials, and they were also under the direction of government bodies and things like this. So these houses were kind of legal institutions with their own property, and the property was meant to be put to work so that they could make a living. And then after the death or retirement of a headmaster, the continuity had to be safeguarded by inhabitants. And very interesting, in the Japanese case, of course, like everywhere else, that could be blood relation. So I give it to my son. He should continue. But they also worked a lot with adoption. So, yeah, when you see my offspring, maybe not the right person for that. He wants to study music or something like this. So you adopted an apprentice and made him a headmaster. That's quite interesting. In fact, in the case of Japan, quite different, I believe, from the Chinese way. But that's a different story. All right, and now we come to the shogi houses. Shogi were also, and go also, they were organized in such kind of institutionalized houses. And for shogi, we had 3 of them. The so-called main house of Ohashi. Then we had a branch house of Ohashi and the house of Rido. And they were endowed, in fact, with a property where they could live with all their staff, so to say, and they received a regular subsidy, which was modest. I come back to that. So, and what was the duties of these houses? Well, quite simple. The houses were supposed to develop and promote shogi. But they also were supposed to participate in official ceremonies, which not only related to shogi, but when, for example, the cousin of one of the shoguns had a birthday, these guys had to go there and bow and attend. So it was quite arduous, these ceremonies, because there were a lot. And also they had to present their art to the shogun once a year. I also come back to that. And the shogi, and this applies also to the 4 go houses, they reported to a high government official, the so-called Jishabugyo, who was the commissioner of temples and shrines. So they had a clear connection to official channels. And the authority of the Jishabugyo was really quite complete. So it extended also to private things, like marriages, adoptions. It was not like you meet him sometimes, but you want to marry, you need to get permission, and things like this. Well, now we come to our core topic, the Ohashi records. Ohashi, is one of the houses, as I said, and in fact, we are lucky enough now to have really very many documents about one of these houses, collected over 200 years. We have about 450 items among them. It's not really only diaries. It's various things. These are, private letters or correspondence with officials. Diary notes. Somebody notes something and writes something. Then there was Shogi-related material, also drafts for publication, teaching materials and things like this. But also we have property plans, floor plans. Where did they live? How did the house look like? What items were in there, and so on. And then we had other things like genealogical trees, the list of their apprentices, their students, all kinds of stuff. And yeah, the story how they were discovered is quite interesting. So I briefly tell it. Nobody knew about the existence of this, and it was in 1980 that a bunch of professional shogi players at that time went to a tempura restaurant to have dinner. And they were having a good time and talking and drinking and, of course, talking about shogi. And then the owner of the restaurant approached and asked, "Are you guys professional shogi players?" And they said, "Yes." And then the owner said, "Well, actually, I'm the great grandson of the Ohashi house." They said, "No, you're kidding, man. No, it's true." And then they learned, yeah, and in our cellar, we have a lot of documents. Might you be interested in that? And then they said, "Oh, yes." And they made an arrangement. And then it was, yeah, and then it was given to the Shogi Association. Later, they somewhat did not agree on some points. And in fact, now the records are back to the family. Yeah, and in a cellar again, which is a pity. There are copies around, but they are not easily accessible. So, but I have to mention one great man who did a lot to make this public and did a lot of research on the Ohashi records already. A gentleman called Koichi Masukawa. He passed away, unfortunately, 4 years ago, but in high age of the 91. He did a lot of research on games in general, and also especially shogi. He wrote about 30 books, something like that, and numerous articles. And his house was full of games and items and things like this. Also, he had a copy of the Ohashi records in his room. And he wrote even a book about it. This book, Ohashike Bunsho no Kenkyu, research about the Ohashi records, with lots of direct quotes and explanations about this and things like this. So we are really lucky enough to have that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to sit here today because the original looks like that. And I tell you, this is somewhat hard to identify, really, and to read. So on the left side is, for example, a letter, yeah, that was a correspondence between two headmasters of their houses about where they exchanged opinions about what is the origin of shogi, because they also didn't know exactly. Or on the right-hand side, this is a report about a fire incident at the house. Yeah, it burned, something, we had this kind of damage. So we have such kinds of things also in there. And we have a floor plan from the early 19th century where they lived. Very valuable, because for the first time we can now imagine, oh, where did they live and how did they live? And again, I briefly come back to this. Lots of literature was there in the boxes. For example, this is a book on shogi from the early 18th century. Yeah, but also you could see they worked with diagrams and had comments on the game. And about 100 years later, in the early 9th century, you see printing techniques advanced. Looks somewhat nicer, but there's lots of literature about shogi and go as well in Edo types. All right, the Ohashi records, what do they tell us? They tell us a lot of things. And I have to say they are not really in good order. It's chaotic material in a way. because some of these letters, they don't even have the exact dates on it. No? So people wonder, is it from when is it? No? And which period and so on. But they give us really a clear, sometimes a clear view of, yeah, how things really were and how these people lived. And they do away with quite a few legions also. I would like to mention one. We have a legend. I talked about Tokugawa Ieyasu, the great unifier, and his predecessors. And very often you read in Shogi histories and also in Go histories that these persons, these great persons, were themselves very interested in playing Go and Shogi. And they were good. And the top Shogi and Go players at that time regularly had access to them and even taught them. And this is probably not true. Yeah. And why did they manage then to be a sponsored craft? It's because, well, they were useful, the Go and Shogi players. It's for sure that Go and Shogi players attended Tokugawa Ieyasu's parties. Yeah, so he did a lot before he became the all-powerful leader. He had a lot of festivals and parties at his castle in Fushimi in Kyoto, and people came and drink. His associates, but sometimes also rivals and things like this. And here, indeed, shogi players and Go players attended, and also actors and other arts people attended. Well, and most probably they had a role there. They should listen to what the rivals of Tokugawa Ieyasu were talking about and should report it to him afterwards. And that's what they did. They were kind of spies, yeah, and useful, and yeah, maybe he was a bit interested in shogi, but he was not in Go, but these people, yeah, proved to be useful, and that's why they eventually managed to get this nice position, and in fact, but even after they gained the status as official recognized houses, we have to be honest. If you see some older shogi literature, you think, wow, there were these houses, and they were like the peak of society and directly attending to the emperor and the shogun and things like this. It's also not true. Yeah, their social status among those recognized crafts, like really arts and other things, tea and professions. Among this class, the status was rather low, in fact. And this led to fierce emotional battles at that time. And here the Ohashi records have examples when they tried to change it a little bit. Yeah, there's a very famous battle between the shogi and the Go houses around 1730, because the Go was recognized, had a little bit a higher standing. Yeah, this was like where you would sit at an official ceremony. Yeah, you sit here and you are next. It was about how high is your subsidy. Little nitty-gritty things. But however, it was so important for them. And in 1730, they tried to challenge the Go houses because their boss, Jisha Bugyo, was very keen on shogi. And then they made an approach. Now we should all be equal. But unfortunately, Jisha Bugyo passed away and the successor was not interested, so it died. Or they fought a battle with the medical doctors at the time. In fact, we are on the same level as medical doctors. Also here, there are lengthy letters and applications and reasons. And the legends about Tokugawa Ieyasu played shogi, things like this. They liked it, of course. They tried to push it because they tried to derive some standing out of it. Ne? Look, even our great Tokugawa Ieyasu was a very keen shogi player, and so how can you dare not to treat us in the right way? So, and then we have to say the endowment of property, so getting a house, of course, was, of course, an extraordinary privilege within wider society. Of course, that's true, because normal people could not dream of that. But the subsidy they received was actually not sufficient for living. A long time, everybody thought, that they received that and then they could play all day shogi and teach and things like this. That was actually not quite true. And we learned, for example, from this floor plan I have shown to you, that they kind of made a hotel business there. For travelers. It was a traveler's lodge. So people who came by could rent the rooms, could stay there. Other records show in later times they were producing straw sandals and things like this. So somehow they also had to do a side business to make ends meet, in fact. And very interesting stories we have in the Ohashi houses about, some personal matters. Succession obviously is important. When the headmaster gets old, or suddenly passes away, so what happens then? And these things could be very complicated and emotional. So you had the direct offsprings, but quite often, your son was not the greatest shogi player, and there were apprentices, much stronger, but how to do it? Sometimes an apprentice was very strong, but very much addicted to alcohol. We have stories about that also. Or one of the apprentices was chasing the headmaster's wife, which was also not so good for succession. So we have this kind of stories in the Ohashi records, in letters and things like this, which make it quite fascinating, in fact. And I mentioned the ceremonial duties of the houses, like attending court events and presenting gifts. They were really arduous and time-consuming. And here I would like to quote a little passage of one of my own papers. How would it be when they had to present to the shogun shogi techniques, shogi problems, mating problems, so-called tsume shogi. And how would that work? How could they present a book of tsume shogi to the shogun? First of all, this story is about 1787. First of all, they had to apply to the Jisha Bugyo. In fact, we have now a new book, and we want to present it to the shogun. How would that be? Of course, they had to apply. They had to wait for months to get permission. And then in 1787, such a visit came about in the following way. First, the delegation from the shogi house was led to a waiting room. It took a while before the order from the Jisha Bugyo came to proceed to Azalea, a formal meeting room. Here the delegation was awaited by the Jisha Bugyo, the senior Buddhist monk, and other officials. The monk received the box with the written shogi puzzles, opened the lid, and showed it to the Jisha Bugyo so that he could confirm formally the contents, which he did by conspicuously nodding his head. The box was closed then and handed to a more junior monk, whereupon the shogi delegation was ordered to return to the original waiting room. After another long wait, they were again ordered to proceed to Azalea. Here the Jisha Bugyo solemnly declared, "Your gift was presented to the shogun by senior counselor Mizuno. The shogun has received and carefully looked at it with pleasure. Thank you very much." But this was not the end of the story. The delegation had to return to the waiting room, where they had left about 20 more boxes with more shogi puzzles, which were now solemnly presented to the Dishabugyu senior and junior councillors and other officials. As not all those eligible to receive the gift were present, the ceremony had to be continued the next day. Shortly thereafter, another visit had to be made to the castle, this time to receive a gift in return, which consisted of some seasonal clothing. So, taking into the consideration, the whole process of preparing the shogi puzzles, writing them down meticulously by hand, producing the gift boxes, applying for the visit, and of the ceremonies during the visit itself, it becomes clear it was hard work. Ne? But then, contrary to these elaborate ceremonial procedures, it seems that in reality, the prepared written shogi puzzles were not held in high esteem because none of them survived. So they were probably quickly thrown away. So this was the hard reality of those times. Well, and then presenting the art to the shogun each year, the so-called Castle Shogi Day, and there was also a Castle Go, in fact. No? This is also quite interesting. And we read in shogi histories, well, that happened once a year, né? And they were sitting in front of the shogun. The shogun was watching while they were playing shogi. Né? Problem here was also the shoguns were not that interested mostly, and it took too long. And so therefore, they had to play the game beforehand and later only display what they showed. And the shogun, in fact, only attended 2 minutes, something like this, saying hello and then go away. But it's interesting, né? Why was it continued, the castle shogi? Well, the reason was it was popular within the castle society. Because at those days, everybody was kind of free, play shogi and go, and other people came, and there was good food, and it was nice. To the castle society, they liked it. And that's why it continued up to the year 1861. Yes, these are just some stories. There are plenty of more in the Ohashi records. And it changed, I think, is still changing our view about the game and the organization of the game in the Edo period. And we can say, what is the significance of this? Well, before the records were discovered, well, we knew formal matters. We knew the names and life and data of the players. We knew the houses. We knew the game records. We knew shogi publications, some official letters. This was known. But as I mentioned, these unproven legends about the influence, connections, and social standing of the headmasters and top players, this was often taken as at face value. Yeah, you find that in the histories that Mr. Tokugawa, liked it very much, or Oda Nobunaga, his predecessors, lauded one of the players and gave him the name Meijin and so on. But as I said, this is most probably fake. It's not true. And then very important, if you read the old histories, what can I say? Very often these are kind of lifeless. Yeah, they are not put into the wider social context. You cannot really imagine how did they live? How was it? What kind of guys were these? And how did they contact their daily life, and how were the social relations? You just read, he won here, he won there, and it's somewhat dry. And the records are pretty much changing this. And the world of shogi and their protagonists have become alive. And therefore, I believe these materials are also very useful, not only for the history of game and shogi, but also for general history on Edo period. It's a very, very nice material, I believe. Well, lots of things still have to be done because many of the documents are still not really classified. Yeah, some are, but classified and then made intelligible to the modern reader. You have seen the old writing. It's difficult. Only experts can read it. Artificial intelligence might help there a lot in the future, but still, most of it has to be done. And I'm not quite sure yet how they manage with the records now in the private storehouse again. Hopefully, we find some way. And the other thing is the connecting of shogi-related sources with sources in other fields of history. So to putting the word of shogi into context. This is also still largely unfinished work. This is often the case, I find also in case of Go or chess. You read some chess history, but somehow you are somewhat lost. What is the real significance of that? So still lots of things to do. And yeah, this is my initial presentation. And so I thank everybody here in the room, but also at home or wherever you sit. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.